Okay, yes, another chapter in my ballet book. I am glad you all get to have all of these because I'm sure in the book some of these things are going to be cut, but you're going to get the unabridged version of all of this. So, anyway, at this point, I have 600 pages, and I'm sure we can't use all 600 pages, but it's still fun for me to go through and remember all of this, and I hope it's fun for you all to read too. So, this particular chapter is called Miss Julie, Galina Panov and Rudolf Nureyev. There are moments that remain in my memory forever. A particular partnership between Rudolf Nureyev and Galina Panov in Miss Julie comes to mind. Galina and Ballet Panov both escaped their terrible and horrific treatment by Russian authorities and made their way to Israel in 1974, if I remember correctly. They had been tortured, and Valerie had even been poisoned, yet somehow he survived and did not just recover, but is still alive, teaching and choreographing, still in Israel at the time I am writing this. The courage and powerful forces of nature that they both were and are continue to inspire dancers even to this day. They are a legacy unto themselves and continue to bring the passion, power, and depth of the Russian training to dancers throughout the world. I remember seeing them perform in Dallas with my company there, the Dallas Metropolitan Ballet, after they were finally out of Russia. They performed The Lady and the Hooligan and Don Quixote Pas de. I remember being completely mesmerized by both of them. Valery was so passionate and powerful as a dancer, jumper, and partner. His every move was a feat of grandeur that made one realize how far we still had to go to reach the lofty heights of these two amazing dancers. Galina was completely fearless in his arms, and the complete trust that she had in his ability during a performance showed in her exploding into lifts that defied gravity. Watching them from the wings when I was 15 years old expanded my mind to see the potential that existed in ballet when one trusted and knew each other's body intimately. Watching them changed me forever. I realized that when one is in partnership with someone of the same intensity and power, that amazing things can become not just possible, but awakening of a dream. Galina was a small, petite young woman and almost white blonde hair. What I noticed the most were the size of her feet. While she was much smaller than I, our feet seemed the same size. Only later in Berlin would I realize that we did have the same point shoe-sized foot. But those big feet on that powerful tiny body made her appear almost like a bunny rabbit to me. And those feet gave her a powerful spring and a steady base from which to explode in jumps, spin effortlessly in pirouettes, and balance in spaces that seemed endlessly suspended in time. Their lifts were death-defying in all ways. Valery could lift her up effortlessly, and in these positions that seemed that she could fall, he would then walk around the stage with her balanced on one hand, and she seemed light as a feather, like an angel in a Michelangelo painting reaching out to touch mankind. I marvel at how the ballet teachers I had at the Etkin Atkinson Ballet School, where I studied for years, were able to bring such incredible talent to Dallas, and that we were able to perform our shows along with these immensely talented dancers. Such a thing is a great gift in all ways, and I am grateful to them for that opportunity. As with so many things in my life, the 6 degrees of separation were more like 2 or 3 degrees. It was very clear to me that all of those that I met in my life and that have greatly impacted me were and still are my spiritual family. Once I left Dallas, I was blessed again to work more intimately with both Galina and Valery Panov at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. It was amazing to see how the universe brought us together again, even though they were constantly in and out because of their own professional engagements in other places and countries. Yet they still impacted me in critical moments, and they both inspired and helped in different ways at critical times. After leaving the Deutsche Oper Berlin, I never saw Galina or Valery Panov in person again, but the images that continue to play in my mind are spectacular, and the genuine emotions that played out in dramatic fashion because of such strong personalities showed me that one cannot be great without knowing how to work with the passion and powerful, complex emotions that exist in humanity. What both of the Panovs taught me was that their personal survival in the face of such horrific and unjust treatment could only have been overcome by their powerful and determined will. I believe it was that passion inside that kept them alive in the face of terrifying odds. They wanted to be artists and dancers that would be allowed to express their rights for freedom and justice, and they proved that such a voice could never be squelched, suppressed, contained, or killed. They showed me that one must face fear and that one must speak up against tyranny, and that the consequences be damned. I have never seen myself as brave in the way that both of them expressed, but I know that what others see in me as brave, bold, and courageous at times is unique. I am glad I have had such a courage in moments. I have touched in a small way that fire inside that refused to back down or not be heard. I am grateful to have had role models such as Nureyev and the Panovs to show me another way to be and exist in this world. They taught me that the world will try to silence you, but you can never let that happen, ever. You must be willing to risk it all and potentially die to sometimes have what you want. While Rudy carried an arrogance, attitude, and ego that was beyond anything I could manage to muster in this life, I did respect him because he taught me a lot about not letting others put me in a box. Valery taught me that the passion inside his soul could never be contained and that it was always seeking a new expression and a way to take ideas and make them into something beautiful. His understanding of music, movement, and his ability to find creative ways to express complex emotions was, at that time, brave, innovative, and yet classically beautiful and dreamlike. I remember while we were rehearsing for The Idiot, a ballet based on the famous author Dostoevsky, Valery wanted us to run from the back of the stage and, in the powerful Russian way, slide on our knees while leaning back on the arches of our feet, in boots, of course, from the middle of the stage to the front. We all looked at him in shock. We did not know how to do such a move. It was classically a Russian Cossack dance move that we did not often see demonstrated by the diverse training that all the Russian dancers learn. But such a type of movement was not ever something I learned in our reality. Frustrated, Valery, who must have been in his 40s, showed us himself. As he effortlessly ran forward with speed and conviction, he did the impossible and showed us exactly what he wanted from us. Stunned, we all stood there with our mouths open. Here we are, half his age, and he is able to do what seemed impossible to us. That is the value of observing other dancers who have abilities that seem to defy the impossible. Once we are shown how to do it, then it must be doable. While we tried, none of us were able to give the effect that he was looking for, and in frustration, he gave up and changed the choreography to something else that we could manage with our limited range and skill. In general, the Russians have no problem expressing emotions, from the most famous to the teachers at SAB, the School of American Ballet. All of them had this special something that was so clearly a flavor and quality of movement that showed permission to be bigger, better, and freer. Clearly, all of them that I knew had managed to escape the communist political patterns of control, and they showed me that real freedom can never be contained or controlled by a government. Galina was 11 years Valery's junior, but she had her own fierceness and strength that showed in her powerful muscles that could spring like a leopard on stage. I did a variation in Ballet West that I had seen Galina do in Berlin. It was so very difficult for me to be in this role because I could see the grace and elegance that Galina could do with that choreography. However, I just did not have the ego to even pretend that I was on her level of ability or her caliber of dancer. While I tried to do it justice, I felt woefully inadequate while performing it. When you have seen the best, everything else seems a hollow attempt. My one thought that allowed me to keep going in that variation was that I knew that no one else could have pulled it off in the company. So while I was not Galina, I at least could fake it enough to get through it, and that in its own way was a small win. But one moment stands out in my mind between Rudy and Galina that was a rare exhibition of Russian temper tantrums and the huge battle of egos. And it happened on a stage and in a performance. Rudolf Nureyev was known for his outbursts and his outrageous behavior that would erupt in any and all moments. He was unapologetic about his behavior and did not care if it made others uncomfortable. He was paired with Galina in the ballet Miss Julie because we were performing in Lincoln Center and Kennedy Center on an American tour. To get such opportunities, one had to have the faces of big stars and combinations of things that perhaps had not been seen in those places. Rudy was a draw in any situation, but Rudy and Galina did not often dance together, or ever, so it was considered special and unique. A perfect draw for a big box office performance, and those locations one had to sell out or sell tickets. To say that these two did not mesh well would be an understatement. Galina was the most understated and self-controlled of the two by a long shot, but in her heart beat the fire of a Russian soul, and that had fought just as hard, if not harder, than Rudy to escape the clutches of the communist political structure. And she did not take a lot of crap from anyone. We had all seen in rehearsals the tense words being spoken between them in hushed tones and evasive glances. Nureyev was way more of a prima donna than Galina, and that word prima donna is mostly associated with singers. Let's just say that words and gestures can be as strong or stronger than songs. There was a tension between them that oddly worked with these characters, but Nureyev tended to take things to the extreme and to test the edges. He was used to pushing around certain dancers, and more often than not, he could get away with it. But other Russians would only take things so far. Both are principal dancers, and Rudy loved to poke the Russian bear in Galina. She was not pleased with his attempts to get under her skin, but she kept her cool in rehearsals, but still was not pleased. I could tell by the set of her jaw and the look on her face. Dancers easily read body language, and the body language between these two was tempestuous at best. We go to do opening night on the American tour. Honestly, I can't remember if it was Lincoln Center or Kennedy Center. I think it was probably Kennedy Center, but I could be wrong because so much happened on that tour. It sort of runs together. We finish the performance of Miss Julie and the curtain goes down. The way things were supposed to go was that the curtain comes up, the corps, us, bow, and then step back. Then the soloists come out and bow and step back. Then Rudy is supposed to come on, bow, and step back. Then finally the Galina comes on and the crowd will roar, and she bows a couple of times and gestures to Nureyev, and he comes to meet her and they bow together. As they step back, then we all step forward and bow and step back again. Finally, flowers come out for Galina. She takes them and bows as people scream bravo. Then she steps back, picks a single rose for Nureyev, hands it to him, indicating that he is an amazing partner. He bows graciously and takes the flower from her outstretched hand, and then together they come to the front of the stage and bow again. Then they step back and the curtain closes. That is how it's supposed to go. This night was going to be different. Once the ballet was finishing up on stage, in the final scene between the two of them, there is some tense conversation happening in Russian. While I don't speak Russian at all, let's just say that the words sounded harsh, and the glare at times from Galina could have burned a hole in the sun. Her body language got very tense, and you could tell that he was not pleased with her, and he was telling her so. His words had the tone of being insulting. Now, again, I don't know what was being said. This was all observation. The curtain comes down and the corps bows, the soloists bow, then Nureyev is supposed to come out from the right. But he does not. The audience is continuing to applaud, but he is still not coming out. Galina is on the opposite side of the stage waiting for him to bow, but he is not coming out. He keeps gesturing to her to go out. That is an insult because it is usually the ballerina that comes out last, not the principal male. This ballet, after all, is called Miss Julie. But egos are now on fire and Rudy refuses to come out. The applause starts to wane as everyone is confused, us included. Finally, Galina comes out and there's a roar of applause for her, and she bows and steps back. Then it is the king of ballet's turn, and he comes out to more roaring applause and bravos. He milks it for all it's worth. He does not gesture for her to come up and bow with him. He is taking center stage in all the limelight. She is furious. Her neck, chest, and cheeks flush a bright red. I think she's going to explode. She decides to step up on her own to be level with Nureyev, but he refuses to budge off center stage, forcing her to be on the side of him. They both step back and the flowers come out for Galina, but Nureyev steps forward and, to the shock of the flower person, takes the flowers for himself. The man looks at Galina, horrified, to let her know that this was not his idea. She is scowling in a way that I have never seen her face look. It was like watching a snowstorm in Russia coming suddenly over the ridges of a mountaintop and pouring into the landscape of her face. Stunned, we can only watch this Russian tragedy continue to unfold. Nureyev bows with the flowers and steps back to Galina. Then, with an exaggerated gesture, he picks one rose from the bunch and hands it to Galina. Such a moment is so outrageously insulting that no one moves or breathes on stage. She takes the rose from his hand in disgust, and as he turns back to the audience, she drops it on the floor. The audience roars at the drama happening, and Nureyev relished in the moment of absurdity that was him showing his superiority, that he was the premier danseur. At that point, the curtain comes down and does not go back up again. The yelling that ensued between the two of them was all in Russian, but they were clearly screaming at each other. We all left the stage as quickly as possible. It was a moment that I will never forget. It was a moment that captivated the essence of two very distinctly different people that really did not seem to like to work together. Both were enormously talented. One had a much bigger ego than the other, but such moments are precious and they make me smile. They are uniquely human, and they show that everything is not always so beautiful at the ballet. Thanks, everyone.